Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Red Path. It's Dara here again with another episode of the Delvarus is in the Details painting series. In this episode today, we're going to take a long, hard look at metallics, and specifically how we can make those metallics interesting, how we can kind of push them into that next level of painting that's really going to make them stand out on the board and, kind of just tell a little bit of a story, shall we say. So when I'm painting metallics, a lot of the time, back in the past, I used to get really caught up in just, kind of applying my washes and calling it done. But I learned over time you can really push those to the next level if you add some extra little steps after the washes. So today we're going to be taking a look at all the different types of rust you can do, sort of adding mud effects. We're going to take a look at adding grime. So we're going to be using a lot of pigments today. We're going to be using a couple of different enamel washes as well, but most of the time we're going to be looking at pigment powders. So if you've never used pigment powders before, this is actually a pretty good video to get you started on those too. And for this video, we're going to be looking at the Terex pattern Termite Assault Drill, my personal favorite unit for the entirety of the World Eaters, as you all know. And yeah, we're going to be looking at how we are going to jazz that metallic up, give it that really rusted and worn look. This technique, it's actually something that I use across my entire model range now, be it painting Lords of War like knights, vehicles, or even straight down to the infantry. I'm actually just using it on them these days as well. It's just really effective. So yeah, it's going to be a fun one. So sit back, grab yourselves a brew. Let's dive into this episode. Okay, everyone. So today we're going to be basically looking at how we can make metallic areas more interesting. So we're essentially going to be covering different types of weathering techniques, rusting techniques, largely working with enamels and pigments to try and basically spice up these areas of silver. So in today's tutorial, we're going to be looking at this termite pattern or Terex pattern termite drill. And we're going to be focusing mostly on the sort of the head of the drill here. So you can kind of see I'm after penciling in a couple of different sort of rust things already, but we're going to focus more on exactly how to do that in just a couple of minutes. So yeah, it's basically largely going to be working with enamels and pigments. So if you're not really too familiar with that, you can either maybe get an idea of it in this video or go back to some of my older tutorials and see how I do it in those. But yeah, I'm going to run you all through sort of the basic sort of steps for that and how you can apply it yourself. So let's get started with some rust. Okay, so one thing that builds up a lot on vehicles of any type, especially ones that see, kind of war zone action and stuff, is rust. So we're going to start by basically laying down a pin wash in some areas with a light rust wash from Ammo MIG. So essentially what this means is we're going to be taking a brush with a fairly, fine point and getting some of that rust wash on it and just carefully applying it to the areas where we want the rust to be. Now it's going to look very bright when it kind of goes on. You can kind of see here it's already basically filling up this area, but it's going to dry a lot darker than it actually goes on, so don't worry too much about that. And you can also basically play around with it. That's the beauty of using enamels, is that you have so much time to actually play around with the effects with different kind of thinners and stuff. So I'm being pretty loose at the minute, just kind of penciling in some rough areas on this on the drill, trying to imagine where rust would build up. And it's important to be somewhat logical here. So we're focusing on the recessed areas, the areas where over time we're going to see sort of corrosion of the metal surfaces and things like that. So you can kind of see here we're going to pin wash just in around here, and basically using capillary action to let the wash do most of the running around for us. And it really doesn't matter if you kind of go a little overboard like I have here. We can clean all this up afterwards and go over it with some different effects and stuff. So you can be pretty free and lenient at this step, just kind of do whatever seems right. So you can kind of see it's flowing around nicely here, getting into all these crevices and stuff. Basically we're going to do a pass on most of the recessed areas with the light rust wash, and I'll come back and show you guys what we're going to do after that. Okay, so we've applied the rust wash over some selective areas of the head of the drill. You can see it's looking pretty okay at the minute. I mean, it's pretty messy being realistic, but that's okay, because we're going to clean this up at a later step. So this enamel wash is basically going to stay active for quite some time, which is going to allow us time to play around with it. Basically do what we want, try and control it as much as we want to. But for right now, it's okay. It's serving as a nice little point highlight. So we're going to go in next with some dark streaking grime. And we're basically going to apply this to some areas of the drill where we think corrosion is going to have built up. You can kind of see this nice greeny brown pattern is going to come in. You can basically just apply this somewhat like a normal wash. Just wash it in and around the areas that you think will have seen basically an awful lot of wear and tear. So the best thing here is kind of keep to recessed areas where you can see a lot of gunk and grime building up, you know, around vents like this. Always a good place to do some. And you can kind of push it in with that rust wash as well and create some interesting sort of dynamic effects going on between the two. This drill, this part of the drill here, we'll say this sort of part, being the part at the back, I imagine is where a lot of the gunk is going to build up, because if you think about it logically, we have dirt coming from the top here down to the bottom here. It's really going to start collecting in that area. So we're also going to do some up by the drill bit, seeing these like sort of recessed areas. Get a lot of that wash going down. And again, be pretty liberal with this because we're going to be cleaning it up afterwards. So you don't have to worry really too much about going too heavy. And yeah, see in and around here as well. This is another area where a lot of grime would build up. So we're just going to go in, apply a nice bit of the wash here. You can see we're being pretty liberal too, you know, we're not too worried about putting on too much. So we're basically going to do that over the whole model and then hit it with the hairdryer to dry it out. So we'll come back for that. Alrighty, so we have our streaking grime laid down now, and you can see it's kind of getting this nice sort of variation of tone across the drill head. So what we're basically going to do now is come in with our thinner. So in this case I'm just using oil medium thinner. I'm basically going to clean up some of this area. Now again, you can be pretty like haphazard with this, just push the paint around where you want it to go. So we're bringing some of that metallic tones back in on the raised areas and the areas where there probably wouldn't be as much streaking. And yeah, just breathing life back into the model, you know, pushing the paint around, that kind of stuff. So this is a really easy part, you know, you're basically just cleaning up, removing the rust and grime from those raised areas, the parts where it wouldn't logically be. So notably the drill head here, those kind of raised kind of parts of the drill, we're taking the grime off there. And you know, just in here as well, we're diluting it a little bit, so kind of getting some interesting shadowing going on while leaving it in the recesses, you know, so you still have that kind of weathered, rusty effect going on. It's pretty simple, pretty enjoyable to do too. It's not really anything too fussy with this. So yeah, we're just going to do that, and then we're going to come back for the next part. Okay, so now that we've cleaned up sort of the rust and streaking grime, we're going to start laying down some pigments. So I'm basically going to give a quick coat of the thinner in this case, but you could use pigment fixer too. They kind of operate in the same way. We're just going to go really quick over some of these areas just to put down an area that sort of the pigment can cling to. Now you don't have to go too heavy here, just keep it nice and light too. Pay particular attention, so you can see here I'm going sort of into these crevices where the drill is. That's where a lot of the sort of pigment is going to be laid down, because that's where the mud and gunk is going to really build up on this machine, especially in this like little cavity here. We're going to really focus on that. So yeah, just lay down pigments more in areas where you can, or sorry, lay down thinner more in areas where we're going to be building up the pigment is the key here. And yeah, it's again really easy to do. Just, you know, prime the model basically at this point is what we're going for. And yeah, we're going to come back, lay down some pigment now. Okay, so the first pigment we're going to be applying is Track Rust from Ammo Mig. So this is a very dark rust tone, and we're basically just going to kind of go into those creviced areas with this and just push it around with the brush, make sure it's adhering to that that thinner that we've already laid down. So you can see we're already getting a really nice dark rusty tone in those crevices where, you know, over time the sort of operation of the machine is going to basically cause a bit of decay in these kind of zones. Now again, with pigments, it's really important to make sure that it's going to be fixed, because otherwise it'll brush off as you're kind of using your model over time. So that's what that thinner was at the start. So you can see we're basically starting to build up the kind of consistency that we want. Now, the thing about pigment as well is that the more thinner you have, the more kind of diluted the pigment will get, and can sometimes dry in different sort of colors and textures. So it's really up to yourself kind of how much you're going to be using of that. And it can sort of interact if you've got, like, we'll say in this case where we have an oil or an enamel wash laid down, it can interact with that as well and sort of blend into it. You can see on this vent here we're getting a bit of blending going on, where it's actually a pretty nice effect because it kind of marries the whole effect in with the model in a logical way, so it doesn't seem too glaring. And again, yeah, really just focusing on these creviced areas where we're going to have a lot of damage building up over time. So basically, yeah, we're going to lay down this track rust and then we're going to come back for the next part. Okay guys, so we can see here now that we've laid down our track rust on basically the kind of lower section of the drill. And we have a pretty nice kind of textured effect going on here. You know, you can see it is starting to like get that weathered older look, which is basically what we're going for. So we're really going to emphasize some of those rusty points now. We're going to take some medium rust from Ammo MIG. We're basically going to go back in on these track rust areas and add a little sort of different rust texture here so that we have, like, you know, variation going on. So you can see it's sort of like a brighter rust. Now you want to work that into your track rust layer as well to make sure that it's not too glaring. And again, how much you use here is really up to yourself, but less is more. You kind of just want to go for some spot points here where rust is sort of, you know, affecting different parts of the metal in different ways, but also, you know, it's more concentrated in some parts. So you can kind of see here we're getting that kind of textured rust look where it's sort of different in some ways and kind of blending all together quite nicely. So yeah, basically we're going to go over and do that over the whole model, and then we're going to come back, add some mud effects to this. Okay, so I've just given the tip of the drill here another coat of the pigment fixer, and I'm going to come in with some dark earth. Basically we're just going to kind of stab kind of at the drill bit here to work some of that earth in. Now the thing about the earth pigments is that when they interact with the fixer, they're going to basically look very dark, but as they cure out, they're going to get lighter in color. So really, you kind of have to strike a balance here between how much fixer you put down and how much pigment you're applying. You can kind of see as we get towards the edge there, you can feather it in some interesting ways, get some nice kind of like rust spots or mud spots going. So this is basically, we're just building up this pigment in sort of the crevices here where, you know, a lot of dust and muck while the drill is tunneling it's really going to be building up. And you can play around with a couple of different earth pigments here if you want to. I mean, I probably will be. Right now I'm using dark earth, but probably going to work in a little bit of Russian earth and Europe earth as well, just to have different kind of textures of the mud. And I'll probably, once this is cured out, do another pass with dark earth just to get, you can kind of get some tonal variation going on there as well. So yeah, basically this step is like, it's pretty fun, to be honest. You know, you're just playing around with it, attacking the model however you see fit, doing as much as you want. And again, just being random is key. You know, you don't want any patterns kind of building up here. And as it kind of gets a little bit liquidy when it mixes with the fixer as well, you can kind of like apply that in other areas just to get some like mud spotting and things like that. But yeah, we're going to do that, and I'm going to come back and show you guys what it looks like after that. Okay, so you can see now we've applied a lot of that muddy kind of pigment texture, and the head of the drill is now pretty interesting. You can clearly see that's, you know, where a lot of the tunneling is going. And I've also sort of added some kind of mud and dust textures to these sort of main drill bits here. So the last thing that we're going to do is I've diluted a lot of the dark earth pigment with some of the mineral spirits, almost turning it into like a liquidy kind of consistency. And taking a very kind of old brush, we're basically going to come in and sort of like create some mud splatter effects with this sort of more liquidy kind of texture. So this can be a fun way of varying up your kind of mud effects, because it's going to dry quite light in color. So even though it doesn't really look like much now, once it dries out, it's going to look really cool. So again, just try to be sparing with this, because it does dry very bright, like I was saying. So while it might not look like much going on, when it cures out, it's going to be very different. So you can kind of add them up here in these areas as well. So they're going to kind of have these like splotchy areas where there's much lighter sort of mud going on. This is a fun way that you can kind of play around with pigments in just some ways that normally they don't get applied. Basically turning them not quite into a wash, but into a more sort of malleable kind of paint. So yeah, basically just going to go around, add some random spots to this, and see what it's looking like afterwards. Okay everyone, so we're more or less finished up with the sort of weathering and all those kind of things with the drill. So yeah, you can kind of see here we got a lot of really interesting different tones and variation kind of going on now. And we have the upper extremity here in the top of the drill where we got a lot of mud and stuff from where the drill is directly tunneling into the earth. And then these vents here where, you know, we got sort of like a build-up of rust and decay over time. And you know, the different sort of tones of rust and all that kind of thing that we're getting on, the different tones of mud and dirt. I will say that normally I don't weather my metallics as much as I've done here, but I think given the sort of nature of the top of the drill like this, it's going to be really, really weathered and worn and covered in crap. So normally I would ease up a little bit on all these effects. You know, I probably wouldn't go as far as I have. But I thought it was a good way of kind of showing all of them together in one place, and sort of if you push it to the furthest, where it's going to end up kind of going. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this one, guys. You can apply this across like a range of all different models. But yeah, let's wrap this one up, and yeah. Well everyone, that pretty much calls it for today's episode of the Delvarus in the Details. Hope you picked up some new fun techniques with this. As you can see from watching the video, there's a lot of fun to be had when messing around with these sort of effects. It's really random is the key, you know, so just splash it around, have some fun with it. And yeah, just don't worry too much if the first model isn't going to look great when you try this. The more you practice it, you're going to really understand how to sort of deal with less is more, that kind of concept and stuff. But yeah, had a lot of fun making this one for you all. Hope you learned some cool new things, and as always, if you paint anything using any of these techniques, just, you know, be sure to let me know. I'd love to see what you're all painting up there in the background. Until then, and until the next episode, everyone, stay healthy, stay safe, and kill me and burn.